Welcome, Nets fans, Knicks fans. This is Battle for NYC, and I'm trying to make a controversial video. So essentially, this is Battle for NYC. I want to talk about which team is playing the better basketball at the moment, and right now I'm going to have to go with the New York Knicks. The Knicks have been playing the better basketball. Not just the record says it, although both of them sort of like their records are a little even. But if you look at the last four games, the Knicks are 3-1, and the last four games of the Nets are like 1-4. And so the Knicks are trending in the right direction. The Nets are going the wrong direction. They haven't played each other yet. I know the Nets are a way more talented ball club than the Knicks are, but sometimes talent don't always translate to wins. And we're going to talk about why that is and why the Knicks are playing better basketball than the Nets are playing at the moment. As you can see right here, this is both teams starting lineup, and there's a lot to talk about here. And some of the reasons why I believe that the Knicks are outplaying the Nets is number one, the Knicks are they're very disciplined on offense. Although they lost a lot of players early in the season, they're basically getting a lot of those players back. They lost Alec Burks. They didn't have Austin Rivers until recently. They also didn't have Emmanuel Quickly. They don't have Obi Toppins. They don't have Frank Ntilikina. They don't have DSJ. So these are rotation players that they have. They've been working on trying to, and these are valuable rotation players that they have had to go without, and so. They're starting to get those players back, so they're trending up in the right direction in terms of their offense, but they still have a long way to go on offense. They're getting better, though. And then on the defensive side, their defense wasn't that great in the beginning of the year. It was okay, but it's been getting better and better. The last game they played against the Indiana Pacers, they played stellar defense. They played a defense that I haven't seen since probably the '90s Knicks. The crazy thing about it, it was a great game to watch. Watched basically 3 minutes ago, and the Knicks they just were not. Their defense stayed stout, stayed aggressive, and it looks like there's like a possession where the Pacers came down with like less than 3 minutes to go, and you can just tell they were just their heart was taken. They didn't know where to go. They knew these guys were not backing down, and they just weren't sure where they were going to get their shot from. And it was just like, it's so crazy being able to sense that. But the Knicks are actually playing great defense now, and they're getting players back. On the flip side, the Nets are struggling, right? They're struggling in a few different places. Number one, they're struggling on the defensive side. They're not allowing, when you look at the differential, it's pretty good. They're allowing only their opponents to shoot about 43%. But one of the issues they're having on the defensive side is they're allowing way too much rebounds. And so opponents are getting way too many second chance points versus them. So they've basically been getting out rebounded by their opponents, especially since like the third game. The second thing, they lost Spencer Dinwiddie. Spencer Dinwiddie is a crucial part of their. He was a starting player in their lineup. He was a major ball handler. Handled the ball a lot for them. Pretty decent usage rate. But now all of that falls on Kyrie, and so that's going to have like chemistry issues down going forward. Not just because it's going to have issues, not just in terms of chemistry, but also the number of points you get from the defensive um, intensity you get for Spencer Dinwiddie. So all that stuff you lose. The other issue that they're having, it seems like there's a lot of politics and weird politics going on. I've heard reports where basically Kyrie and KD, there's a little friction. Coach was asked about it, and coach says he's going to let Kyrie and KD work out their issues on their own. And so this early, especially these guys are supposed to be best friends, they wanted to play with each other. You can't be having chemistry issues if you really wanted to play each other this with each other this badly. Um, and the other thing is more with Kyrie Irving is more a little bit about chemistry as well. Kevin Durant is the most efficient scorer on their team, but yet Kyrie Irving is basically taking more shots every game than Kevin Durant does. If you watch the games, it feels like Kyrie Irving is more the focal point in the offense. He's trying to get his off, then he basically gets Kevin Durant more involved. A lot of times you see him come down and he'll take a shot, and he does that quite a few times in the game. Either he comes down and jacks up a jump shot or three, or he'll come down and basically go one on one and just take it all the way himself. And it's not really a great way to run a team. I don't think that's really how Kevin Durant imagined this was going to go, especially when you have two great players like this. Both players have to play very well amongst each other. They have to play a little, there has to be some unselfishness. Actually, especially Kyrie Irving. If you have a player who's way more efficient than you are, you definitely need to be a little more unselfish. You need to, and also him being a point guard, he needs to work on getting the other teammates a lot more involved as well. And so that said, let's basically look at some of the statistics. So right here, we're going to look at basically some advanced stats for both the Nets and the Knicks to see how they stack up against each other. And so before I go any further, I just want to basically let you guys know the research that I've done before, that I've done prior to this, it suggests that basically the most important things in terms of being able to win basketball games is how efficient are you on offense? How good are you at limiting your opponent's efficiency? So you need to basically the differential of your field goal percentage and your opponent's field goal percentage, and you also need the differential of your rebounding versus your opponent's rebounding. So how well can you outshoot your opponents, and how well can you out rebound your opponents? Those are the two very important differentials that I found so far that are primary factors in teams' ability to win ball games. And so, with that said, it allows me to focus on certain statistics. And so, in this advanced statistic that we're looking at here, Nets on top and the Knicks at the bottom. In the first column that I have highlighted, we have true shooting percentage. I'm focused on that, and then the other highlighted columns that I'm focused on. Mostly, we're actually just gonna focus on true rebounding percentage. I'm sorry, total rebounding percentage, and we're not really gonna go into win shares right now because win shares is a little funny too. It doesn't really tell the whole story. It does give you some insights from in terms of player to player, but we're gonna focus on true shooting and total rebound percentage because I feel those are the two primary stats that you know basically uh, team efficiency versus the opponents, and your rebounding versus your opponent rebounding is the most important thing. So we're going to focus on those two things. So true shooting, the Nets essentially. They basically the true shooting, the average true shooting for the team is 56%. The Knicks is only 52%. So the Nets are basically 4 percentage points better than the Knicks are. And so then if you look at the total rebound percentage, the Nets are at 9.2% and the Knicks are at 10.6%. So the Knicks are about 1.5% better um, from that standpoint. And so what this suggests, obviously, the Nets are a much better offensive team than the Knicks are right now. But like I said, the Knicks are trending up on the offensive side. The Nets, given all their problems that they have in terms of efficiency, they're not maximizing their efficiency, so it's pretty scary, but they're still a very efficient ball club. They can still score the ball. But where they're having issues is basically being able to close out on the defensive end by rebounding the ball. That's where they struggle, and you can kind of see that. That's why the Knicks are actually better than them in terms of rebounding. The Knicks have been improving on the rebounding side. They struggled early. They had some issues with it early in the season, the first two games, but they've been getting better. So these numbers are actually going to look better as the season goes on for the Knicks. But the Knicks are better than the Nets in this standpoint. And so you have one team better on the offense, the other team better on the defense. Uh, but like I said, on both sides, the Knicks are trending up, where the Nets seems to be trending down on both sides. So here we're going to take a look at basically I got the differential for the Nets and also for the Knicks. So what these differentials are, so I took basically essentially all the statistics uh, for the Knicks, and then I subtracted their opponent's statistics to get these differentials. The same thing for the Nets, so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening to see if we can get a little context with what's happening with each team and which team is and how they're doing. And so if you look at the Knicks opponents are basically making about one field goal more than they are. Opponents are also shooting attempted five field goals more than the Knicks are. And so it's interesting. So we kind of we wonder why. So let's look to see if we can see why. First place we can look at to see is the rebounding. Are we given more opportunities to the opponent, or we basically are rebounding our opponents, and we are out rebounding the opponents. Although our opponents are getting 1.5 offensive rebounds more than we are, but overall there's about five field goal differential. So now we look at the turnovers. So the turnovers is where the Knicks are struggling, and I think that's contributing to the opponents being able to have more field goal attempts. But however, I do notice when you control for turnovers, the games where the turnovers were essentially even with the opponents, the Knicks still tend to average less field goal attempts than the opponents does. And kind of what that suggests to me is the Knicks are disciplined in offense. They know what good shots are. They know the kind of shots that they want to get, and so they work towards those getting those shots. And so, and same thing with the Brooklyn Nets. If you look at the Brooklyn Nets, they basically um, they basically average the same field goals made as the opponents, but the opponents average about 8 more field goals than the Brooklyn Nets. If you look at total rebounds, that kind of tells you the story. And so the Brooklyn Nets give up about 4 rebounds a game, but they give up one more turnover per game. And so the Brooklyn Nets actually a lot more disciplined, are very disciplined on the offensive end, although they have issues where it's gonna where it's kind of hurting them, where they're not able to maximize their offensive efficiency. Believe it or not, they're still a pretty very solid offensive team, and the reason why they get less shots on goal is because they know where they want to go. They know how they want to score, and so on for the most part, they're very efficient. Now, if you go look at the field goal efficiency between for both teams, the Knicks are 2%, about 2% more efficient than their opponents. The Nets are about 3.6 or 4% more efficient. So that tells me the Nets are but if you, the Nets are very good they're good on defense, obviously. They're limited the opponent's field goal. And also the Nets are actually shooting a higher percentage than their opponents for the most part. And so this is a pretty nice spread. A 4% efficiency or a field goal differential between you and your opponents, that's really good. But if you then go and take a look at their 3-point efficiency, the Knicks actually basically have basically an 8.7% differential when it comes to 3-point percentage. So they're basically shooting 8.7% better than their opponents at the 3-point line. And their opponents is taking 11 more 3-pointers, and the opponents is making about 1 more 3-pointers than the Knicks, but the Knicks are a lot more efficient from there. So this suggests the Knicks play better defense, is playing really good defense on 3-point shooters, and the Nets they're only about 3% better than your opponents. So the Knicks play better 3-point defense than the Nets do. So then we move over to basically the rebound. The Knicks average about 2.5 rebounds more than the opponents, while the Nets give up 4 rebounds to their opponents. Now, if you look at the point differential, I didn't have it highlighted, but the Knicks are -3 on average, and that's because the 3 games they lost, they're essentially the teams wanted going away. 2 of them was really big blowout, kind of almost 20-point blowout losses, and so and the games that the Knicks have won, the 3 games they've won, was a blowout. The other 2 were fairly close games, and so then if you look at the Brooklyn Nets, they're a very good offensive team. They've won quite a few blowout. They've blown out a few of their opponents, and so that point differential is pretty good. It's going to be fairly high. It's not extremely high, but it's high enough. So basically, 6-point differential is pretty good. So it shows you how good an offense the Nets are, and it's crazy that they can actually do better. That's the crazy part. And so down here is just these graphs are just visual representations of some of the stuff we talked about, the field goal and 3-point differential. If you see here, as you see here, the Knicks are in blue. Their field goal differential is lower than the Nets. Because Nets are just a really good offensive team. But then if you look at the 3-point shooting, the Knicks basically that blue line, they're way more efficient from the differential is much higher than the Nets are, and that's because they play much better defense on their at the 3-point line on the opponents than the Nets do. And so total rebound and the point differential, these are just visualization of that as well. And so what I want to do is Like I said, I feel like the Knicks are trending in the right direction, and I've explained some of the reasons why the Nets are trending in the wrong direction. And so let's take a look at some of the games they've played this year so far. And so the first game they played was against the Golden State Warriors. Again, we're gonna focus on a few things. Basically, we're gonna focus on offensive efficiency and the opponent's efficiency, and then we're gonna focus on rebounding and possibly, a few other things that basically we think that are contributing to the win or the loss for the team. So first of all, we're going to look at field goals. Golden State Warriors made five more field goals than the Net. I'm sorry, the Nets made five more field goals than the Golden State Warriors. Although the Golden State Warriors took seven more field goals, and the Nets were 8% more efficient from the field goal, and 12%, almost 13% more efficient from the 3-point line. And and in this game, the Nets out rebounded the Warriors by 10. So that was really good. And so they blew out the Warriors because obviously with those efficiency numbers, them basically with an 8% differential on field goals. So essentially, the net shot 46% and the Golden State Warriors shot 37%. I mean, you're going to win ball games if you're going to have that kind of differential, or if you're going to be that more efficient than your opponent is. And so they blew out the Warriors. And so the second game they played against the Boston Celtics, and in the game versus the Boston Celtics, this is where we started seeing some of the issues in terms of rebounding. The Boston Celtics were able to out rebound them. I mean, they blew out the Boston Celtics, so this resulted in a win. But there are some things that started to pop up in this game. So if you notice from left going right, the Nets made four more field goals than the Celtics, but the Celtics attempted 22 more field goals. Uh, the Nets was 16% more efficient and 22% more efficient from three-point land. But if we then go and look to see why was the Celtics able to attempt 22 more field goals than the Nets were, uh, we essentially go to rebound. They got out rebounded by four. But then if you look at the offensive rebounds, then the Celtics got 20 offensive rebounds, which is 11 more than the Nets did. And so that's what helped contributed to the to this field goal field goal differential where the Celtics took a lot more field goals than the Nets did. Nets played very good defense. Uh, However, this is something that's definitely not a good sign for the Nets, and we'll see how that affects them as time goes on, especially when games are a little closer and more tight. But they were able to basically blow out the Celtics because they were just a lot more efficient than Celtics were. And so the next game was they played was against the Charlotte Hornets, and so against the Charlotte Hornets, the Hornets made eight more field goals against them. Charlotte Hornets took attempted eight more field goals. They were 2% more efficient than the Nets were. The Nets were 7% more efficient from the 3-point line. They made 7% more. They made seven more 3-point shots than the Hornets did, and the Hornets still won this game by about 2 points. Let's take a look and see why they got more field goal attempts than the Nets did. And if you look at the total rebounds, the Nets got out rebounded by six, and they gave up seven more offensive rebounds to the opponent. And so the opponent had 13, while the Nets only had six. And so this is not a recipe for winning. If your opponent is out rebounding you, especially in a close game, you can't win ball games like that. And so also then they turn over the ball. They had seven more turnovers than the opponents did. And then the opponent's number one was less disciplined. Hornets were disciplined. They knew they could now shoot the nets, so they basically played their game, hit the paint, and really um, won the game in the paint and from the 2 point with 2 point field goals for the most part. The Nets did outshoot them from the 3 point field goal, but it just sometimes 3 point shooting is not enough because there's all other factors that determine winning, like rebounding. Because if you give up rebounds to your opponents, you give them more opportunities, they're going to use that to score. Same thing with turnovers. If you have a lot more turnovers than your opponent does, that's gonna also impact your ability to win ball games as well. So the Hornets won this by two, and the factors were rebounding, turnovers, and also the Hornets were essentially more efficient from the field. And so we're seeing field goals starting to affect the Brooklyn Nets. The other and that's kind of like they're going in the wrong direction with that in terms of rebounding, and that's going to continue to affect the team. The other thing is they lost Spencer Dinwiddie in this game, as he only played 15 minutes. Spencer Dinwiddie is a primary one of their ball handlers, has a fairly high usage rate, and now without Spencer Dinwiddie, not only do you lose that production in terms of points, rebounds, and assists, you also lose a lot of chemistry because now Kyrie Irving is basically now you have to depend on Kyrie Irving to basically distribute the rock and to get everyone and Kevin Durant involved. But as you notice, Kyrie Irving has been averaging more field goal attempts than Kevin Durant, although Kevin Durant is actually the best player on the team and the most efficient scorer. And so this is going to exacerbate or make that situation worse. And so that's something you have to look out for and has been an issue. There's been talk of chemistry issues with the team. And so that's going to continue to plague this team. And, obviously, like I said, they're 3-4, and nobody expected the Nets to be 3-4 this early. And so, again, we're seeing rebounding has affected their ability to win. They lost this game because they weren't able to keep the opponent off the boards. And chemistry is starting to be an issue. They lost Spencer Dinwiddie, and that's going to be an issue going forward because they've lost that production, and it also losing Spencer Dinwiddie also impacts their chemistry. So now the next game they played is they played against the Memphis Grizzlies. They also lost this game. Um, and so if you look at it, they basically were without three of their top guns. We obviously know Dinwiddie is out, but the top two guns they had, Kevin Durant and and Kyrie Irving was out, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But if you see here, they took about they essentially the field goal attempts and made were essentially the same. The Grizzlies made one more field goal than they did. But if you kind of go down, and the Grizzlies were 2% more efficient than they were. Grizzlies were about 1% more efficient than they were from three. Although they made more threes than the Grizzlies did, they still lost this game. And that's because the Grizzlies were just more efficient. The Grizzlies know they cannot shoot them, so the Grizzlies played their game, probably hammered them in the paint. And so, well, one of the other things too, the Grizzlies actually were more aggressive, and because they basically got more field goals. So that's actually the primary reason. Um, one of the one of the primary reasons that the Grizzlies won this game. The other reason is they got out rebounded by the Grizzlies by 6, and the Grizzlies got 3 more offensive rebounds than the Nets were able to get. This resulted in a loss to the Grizzlies by 5 points. And so the thing I know, like one of the issues that they're going to have going forward, obviously, you see rebounding is still an issue, is affecting their ability to win. With this one is mostly free throw shooting. Uh, excuse me. However, with the Nets, one thing we're seeing in this game is load management. It has been ridiculous with the league the last few years. We saw how it affected the Clippers. Their two top guns were basically taking off whenever they wanted to, and so the rest of the team it was an issue for the rest of the team. They didn't like that, and so in this situation, you have to be careful how your team perceive the load management for Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. It's very odd that both of them are out at the same time. So it seems a little silly that you have load management for your top two players and you don't stagger it. At the very least, you stagger it to increase your chances of winning ball games, and so you're not without your two top guns, like because you're doing load management on both of them. It's just kind of really crazy. So what that tells me is you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving essentially running the show, and they're doing whatever they want to do, and so the team is not being run by the coaches, and it's not being run by the front office. Is really being run by Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant, and it's really silly that both of them were in load management for one game at the same time. I don't know. In my opinion, it just doesn't look right. It seems really silly, and it resulted in them losing a game versus the Memphis Grizzlies. Honestly, going forward, this is something to look out for. If they're going to continue to do this, they're in for a tough season. If they're especially if they're going to do load management, both of them are going to be on load management at the same time. They're going to have a very tough season if that's what's going to happen. Because obviously, given both of the injury history, I get, some they might need some load management. However, uh, at the same time, again, it just doesn't make any sense, and it is going to affect not just affect their ability to win those ball games, but it's going to have chemistry issues. Guys, I don't think this team, the guys are not really going to like it, and it's going to be a problem for them. The other thing I want to talk about with the rebound is also, if you look, is they're very inconsistent with the rebounding because like the team is very inconsistent with the rebound. One thing I noticed, you have, for example, Joe Harris. So he actually had 8 rebounds this time around. However, he has games where he has like 1 rebound. The previous game, he might have had like 1 rebound, and I know I've seen a few games where he had like 1 or 2 rebounds. This one he had 8 rebounds because there's no Kevin Durant there, so I guess he had to step up a little more. But the coaches need to work on these players rebounding. It needs to be a priority and a focus for the team. They have the team. They have the players to out rebound their opponents, but for some reason they're not doing it. And it's going to have to be an all hands on deck kind of thing. And the coaches need to focus on it. And I think this is where the Knicks have an edge over the Nets. The Knicks have a coach and a team. Has a domineering coach and a very good coaching staff that know how they want their team to play, and they basically make sure their team plays that way. If the team doesn't play that way, the guys don't play that way, they don't get to play. But for the Nets, when you talk with the Nets essentially, um, the players essentially the two top players are essentially running the team, and so that affects the coach's ability uh, to have an impact on how the team plays the game. And so this is an issue. So coaching is an issue. It kind of shows up, in my opinion, in terms of for the rebounding, but it also shows up in this load management issue. It shows that basically the coaches and the front office is not really in charge when it comes to this team, and so that's an issue. They trend in the wrong direction with that one, where the Knicks are actually have an upper hand in that one. And so the next game they played was against the Atlanta Hawks. And so same thing here. If you looked, they did get back their two top guns, Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. But as we say, Spencer Dinwiddie is out for the rest of the year, so that's going to be an issue for them. If you look at the field goals, they have 7 more field goals than the Hawks did, 1 more attempt than the Hawks did. They were about 7% more efficient than the Hawks were shooting. 7% more efficient from the 3 point line than the Hawks, although the Hawks took more threes, the Nets made 1 more, but way more efficient. And they only won this game by 4 points. And so if you go over and look, the Hawks, one of the reasons was the Hawks actually was more aggressive, so they got more free throws uh, than the Nets were. But if you look at the rebounding is an issue here. So rebound is one of the issues why this game was a lot closer than it was. They got out rebounded by 14, and the Hawks basically got 8 more offensive rebounds than they did. So this game should not have been that close, given the fact that they were so much more efficient than the Hawks were. But they're able to squeeze this one out by 4 games. So this is a situation where you're gonna win. They're gonna lose ball games with very weird stats, where they're gonna either be even or outshoot ball clubs, and then people are gonna wonder how did they lose this game? Although they outshot, they were, let's say, 2% more efficient than the opponent, and then they still lost. And all you have to do is basically go look at the rebounding and also look at rebounding turnovers, and so those are things you got to pay attention to the squad. So essentially, the next game they played. Oops, I'm sorry about that. So the next game they played against the Hawks. So they had a back to back with the Hawks. So the next game, the Hawks made adjustments. Excuse me. The Hawks had 8 more field goals. The Hawks had 8 more field goals than the Nets did. Had 7 more attempts. Was way more efficient from the field and also from the 3 point line. So that was really the story of this game. They blew out the Nets, and so that was really the story. The Nets, the Nets didn't shoot very well. This game was really interesting because it kind of highlights one of the issues that I was talking about before. The Nets, Kyrie Irving went 6 for 21, Kevin Durant 10 for 21. Kevin Durant is more efficient than Kyrie Irving, but Kyrie Irving is taking the same number of shots and is way less efficient. If you watch the game, it actually looks worse. Kyrie Irving was coming down, taking shots without getting his teammates involved, and you can tell Kevin Durant was frustrated, a little frustrated in this game, and it was just like there was a couple of times Kevin Durant just got a rebound and dribbled up, took the ball up himself. One time, Kyrie Irving was calling for the ball. Kevin Durant didn't give him the ball right away, but only because Kyrie Irving really called hard for the ball. Kevin Durant finally gave it to him like around half court, but then Kyrie Irving got the hint and then actually gives Kevin Durant the ball during that offensive set. But I think this is going to be an issue going forward. Kyrie Irving, someone needs to convince our Kyrie Irving to play to basically to give up a little more shots to make just to make at least at the very least to make Kevin Durant a priority, right? Have him take more shots, take less shots than Kevin Durant, and at least try to get the other teammates involved as well, a little more involved, because he can always get his own shots. And so if he can get his own shots, point guards that are good, that are good point guards, what they essentially do, they'll get their teammates involved and make sure their teammates are going off first. And the next thing you know is like then they start going off, and then the team will be a lot more efficient if he did that. But someone has to be able to convince him that this game was a great example of that issue. The fact that Kyrie Irving is focused more on himself than he is on the team as a whole in terms of getting his own shots. He's making sure he gets his first, then he gets the teams involved. And in my opinion, he should not be shooting as much as Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant should be the primary focus. And so in this game, they got blown out by the Hawks, and you can tell one of the reasons that was, like I said again, Kevin Durant you can tell he was a little frustrated. The whole team was out of sync on offense, and it was because Kyrie Irving shot poorly, but then he was basically looking for his shot, although he was shooting very poorly, instead of getting everyone else involved. And so the next game was against the Wizards. Sort of the same thing. Kyrie Irving took more shots than Kevin Durant did, so they were not as efficient as they could have been on offense, but they were more efficient uh, than the Wizards. I told you, like I said before, this is where you're going to start seeing these weird stuff. So if you look here, uh, Wizards made 3 more field goals than they did. Wizards had 23 more field goal attempts. The Nets were 8% more efficient than uh, than the Wizards were. There's no way the Nets would be 8 more efficient from the field goal and 7% more efficient from the 3-point line. They should not be this more efficient and lose this ball game. But they did, and they lost the ball game by 1 point. And that's because if you look over, you look at number one rebounding. Although they out rebounded the Wizards. If you look at offensive rebound, the Wizards got 6 more offensive rebound than the Nets did, and so that basically contributed to the additional attempts for the Wizards, which gave them a better chance to win. Same thing with the turnovers. If you look, the Nets had 13 turnovers, and so that gave the Wizards also more attempts on the basket. And so this is why you do have to focus on other aspects of your game, aside just from the your offensive efficiency. Although I think all their offensive efficiency is still pretty good, they're trending in the wrong direction because the chemistry just isn't there. They're not as efficient as they could be, and it's kind of scary to think because they're pretty efficient, but they're losing the ball game because they're not able to rebound. Um, and they're giving up too many offensive rebounds. In some games, they're turning it over too much, and so this is why I feel like the Knicks are playing a better brand of basketball because the Knicks, as the games have gone on, as they've played more and more games, they're rebounding better and better. The Nets are rebounding worse and worse. On the offensive end, the Knicks are a way worse offensive team than the Nets are. It's not even close. The Knicks are a worse offensive team, but they're getting better. They have younger players that are getting better on the offensive end. They're also very disciplined on the offensive end because they essentially make sure they look for their shots. They know the kind of shots that they're looking for, and they focus on it. They try to make sure they get those shots. On the defensive end, they're also improving. on the defensive end. They're also rebounding, improving their rebounding on the defensive end. So the Knicks are actually trending up and trending in the right direction. And if you look at the Nets and you look at these games, you start to realize the Nets are actually trending in the wrong direction. Hey, I know this is really controversial, but to tell you the truth, if you go back and look at the record, the Nets are under 500 right now. The Knicks are around 500, and it's although it seems very similar, one team is trending up, the other team is trending down. Because if you look, the Nets, actually the last 5 games the Nets have played, I think the Nets are like 2-4 in their last. I'm sorry, they're 1-4 in their last 5 games, and the Knicks are the Knicks are 3-1 in their last 4 games. And so one team is trending up, the other team is trending down. And so that's why the Knicks are playing better basketball right now. That's why the Knicks are winning the battle for NYC. They're winning the battle for the hearts and minds of the fans. Hey, look, I know this is kind of controversial, but if you guys like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And I really appreciate it. If you guys also comment below and love to make more videos, hopefully I'll speak to you guys again soon.